Okay, we'd like to welcome you to the 1:30 session. This session is entitled The Worth of Water, a Great Lake Story. And we are lucky enough to have Julia and Cheryl both online right now. And I'm going to turn it right over to Julia.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this session. As was mentioned, my name is Julia Robson. I'm the co-founder of Walk to Sustain Our Great Lakes, and I was also the director for The Worth of Water, a Great Lakes Story. I am so fortunate to be joined by Cheryl Nen with Milwaukee Riverkeeper, who's pictured here on your screen, and then she's also in our chat here. Both of us will be joining you for a live Q&A session after this screening that we're very much looking forward to. So just a really quick kind of just general what to expect. Our next steps is we are going to screen the film in a couple minutes starting here. We will play it within the Zoom session here, but we do recommend that everybody, if you can, just for better quality of the film and experience, log out of Zoom and then go to YouTube to watch the film. And then we're going to join back into this Zoom meeting at around 3 p.m. Feel free to take a break after the film though and stretch your legs, but we'll be back at 3 p.m. for a live Q&A from then until 3:30. So either log off, go to YouTube to watch it, or you can watch it as it's streaming and screening right here in the Zoom chat. And yeah, we'll keep it short and sweet so you can dive in, but we very much look forward to seeing you back here at 3 p.m. for a live Q&A with Cheryl and I.
Okay, so I will start streaming now, but again, feel free to log out, and I've posted the link into the chat a couple of times now, so you should have that link which will take you out to YouTube to watch. But again, if you want to stay here, we'll stream it right here as well. I think the video and audio will be better if you go out and kind of watch it on your own and then come back for the Q&A. So let me get started here.
It's about 3 o'clock, so why don't we go ahead and we'll get started with some Q&A. One of the first questions, you had so many different topics in the film. How did you decide which ones to focus on?
Oh, wow. I think it was hard to decide. A lot of what we decided to focus on were the things that we found to be extremely eye-opening as ecologists, in particular when we were reading Dan Egan's book, The Death and Life of the Great Lakes. Because when we were reading that book, we were taken aback by so many of those issues of the Great Lakes space as ecologists that we felt that, you know, if our eyes are being open to a lot of this from this book, I mean, what does that mean for the general public? So we tried to focus on, one, a lot of the issues that stood out in that book, from invasive species to non-point source solution to water diversions and water scarcity. But we really wanted to hone in on topics too that we felt like not only could we educate people about, but they were also topics that people could then take action in their own lives towards. A lot of the topic that Cheryl talks a lot about in the film, that's something that there's plenty of takeaways that people can pull from that and then implement into their own lives. So there were so many topics. Honestly, it could have been probably a Netflix series worth of a film to focus on all of, you know, Great Lakes topics and issues, but we really tried to focus on the issues of today and the future for the Great Lakes. So less so on what were the issues of the 60s and 70s, but one, how far we've come and what are the things that we're going to face moving into the future.
Okay. Cheryl, this question is for you. What needs to happen in order to improve our aging infrastructure to help prevent human waste from getting into our waterways, like your research is finding?
Boy, well, you know, it's interesting. We were just saying this movie is about, I think, 4 years or so ago. Is when Julia did the walk with Alyssa, and you know, I think really nothing has changed dramatically since then as far as the infrastructure goes. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of work we need to do to fix our pipes. And I think the good news is with the change of administration recently, you know, and frankly, even during the Trump administration, there was a lot of talk about infrastructure, and talk is great, but you know, talk is cheap, as they say. But you know, what we're hearing on the federal level is they're talking about some pretty serious infrastructure bills. You know, we're hearing like $10 billion and you know, over the next, which would be like 10 billion a year for the next 5 years, which would be like a $50 billion package. I think there's been some packages that are being floated that are even like, you know, much more significant than that, associated with different, you know, jobs bill ideas. And, you know, Biden's been talking about maybe doing something similar to the Great Lakes Conservation Corps, which, you know, built a lot of our parks back in the day. A lot of the beautiful elements of our parks were built, you know, by those original conservation crews in some cases. So, you know, I think that, you know, there's really no magic bullet. It's going to require a lot of investment in fixing pipes. But I think it, you know, there's huge opportunity to put people back to work as well, and huge, you know, need for science. I mean, you know, a lot of the work that we do kind of testing water quality at the stormwater outfalls or in the rivers as well, you know, can help us prioritize areas for the cities where they need to do maybe more dye testing, smoke testing. They need to do some more, you know, investigations on their end. And certainly that work is ongoing. But, you know, if you look at kind of the state of our infrastructure, you know, not only pipes, but dams as well, and other water infrastructure. And we have a real serious need for funding to fix all of this stuff. So, you know, I'm hopeful that over the next 5 years, if we can get some funding, we can start to, you know, make some headway on this problem. But, you know, cities like Milwaukee are very old. We have pipes in the city, and in a lot of our cities in Wisconsin that are well over 100 years old, right? So, and so we, you know, we have a lot of work to do on the sewage side and on the drinking water side as well with lead pipe replacement.
Okay. Julia, next question is to you. That is a long way to walk. How did you guys train for that? I mean, like you literally physically walked from Lake Michigan to Lake Superior. How did you guys train for that to make sure that your bodies could handle that?
Yeah, you know, I wish I could reference some well thought out, vigorous training program that we followed. But we didn't train enough for the physical aspect of the walk, I must say. Alyssa and I, prior to doing this project, she and I had both done overnight backpacking trips. Mine at the time, I had done maybe 50 miles max, but nothing like this. And we ended up getting so tied into making the film leading up to leaving for the walk that we just didn't have the time to actually do any physical training. And then the fundraising aspect of it that we were doing too, it was just so much that all of a sudden it was late August and we were supposed to leave and start the journey. So not enough training, but one thing I did learn is you can't train enough. You can't train your feet enough for something like that. The amount of foot pain once you hit 15 miles and then tried to hit 20 I just had never experienced that. But you kind of get what they call your trail legs eventually, where your body just gets used to that type of mileage every single day. And for us too, since we didn't follow a footpath the entire time, like the Ice Age Trail or anything, we were on segments of it. We wanted to stay in the Great Lakes Basin. So we connected as many different interurban trails, hiking trails, even roads at times. So we had quite a bit of street walking that we ended up doing, like roadside walking. And that was really rough on the body. But yeah, I would say definitely train for something legitimately before you do something like this. But it ended up being for the better because we ended up making a legitimate film out of this that I think now on YouTube, it has over 17,000 views. So it's reaching people at a level larger than we had originally thought it would if we were to just make a YouTube series on our phones. So all worthwhile in the end, but would have done more training if I would have thought it out further.
I applaud you through all the pain. You two were both smiling through the whole thing. I was watching you, and I mean, I'm sure there was days where you're like, this is what were we doing? But smiling the entire time, and you made it. You made your goal. So that's something very to be proud of. Absolutely. Cheryl, it looks like there's a question in the chat from Kelly. The one thing I was worried about most when Waukesha got approved was within a couple of years we would see another one, and we did with Foxconn. How do we prevent more diversions in the future? Because municipalities are going to say, well, Waukesha got approved, why can't we?
That is a great question. And for the record, Kelly's one of our stream monitoring volunteers. Hi, Kelly. She's a local hero. So, you know, God, I wish I had an answer for how do we prevent another diversion. I think if anything, we're going to be seeing more and more of them. And I think that was touched on in the film as well. I think, I think especially with climate change and affecting, really everywhere, I think there's a great likelihood that we'll be seeing more and more diversions, unfortunately. I think the one thing we were really involved with the Waukesha diversion, and we have really put a lot of pressure on, and I mean, we obviously were against the diversion, but a big part of the Great Lakes Compact is that, you need, the whole point of the compact is to keep Great Lakes water in the Great Lakes. And so if water is being diverted outside of the Great Lakes, it has to be returned, minus an allowance for consumptive use. And there's a lot of provisions in the compact that really get to ensuring that that water is returned in a way that protects like the biological, chemical, and physical integrity of the streams. And they need to prove that they have no other water supply alternatives. It's for a municipal need for public water supply purposes, things like this. And so, one of the things I think that can prevent future diversions is holding Waukesha to a very high bar. They have most of their approvals, but they actually don't have all of their approvals yet. They have their return flow discharge permit, but there's still a lot of haggling along the water supply side of things there. Do you know the alternative that was suggested for Waukesha? Yeah, so there was a bunch of different alternatives that were looked at originally for Waukesha, including kind of more local riverbank inducement type options, where it would be kind of taking shallow groundwater and then essentially cleaning that water and putting it right back into the Fox River. And there were various different local alternatives that we thought warranted looking at more. Or, in radium treatment and water conservation and kind of a combination of things. But, I think it's likely that Waukesha is going forward. We are continuing to apply pressure to make sure that the project is being done, I think as close to the book as possible. And, I think Foxconn was a hard one. I mean, we actually litigated the Foxconn diversion and unfortunately lost at the lower courts. But, our big issue with Foxconn was that the Great Lakes Compact really has language in there that says that water diversions have to be for public water supply purposes only. And we didn't feel that that Foxconn met that and continue to have concerns. And, obviously Foxconn's projects have dramatically changed. So I think that there's a valid question of whether, their diversion should remain on the books or not, or should be readdress especially the quantity of water that they were allowed to get from the lakes. And I think if people haven't seen, there was a recent application this week from Summers, which is a small town near Kenosha, for a Great Lakes diversion. And there's also pending conversation of a fairly large diversion in the Chicago area to Joliet, Illinois. Those are kind of a little different in that they wouldn't require the same level of regional approval that Waukesha did for different reasons. But mostly like the Summers application and Foxconn only require Wisconsin approval. So I think the one thing that we need to do is make sure that the compact is strongly implemented and that we're paying a lot of really close attention to those details because of the really important precedent setting nature of all of these diversions and the impact that, the ripple effect of the impact that could happen throughout the Great Lakes, really. Okay.
Julia, kind of two questions. What is something that you learned that you didn't know before doing the walk? And then the same question for what's something that you learned before that you didn't know when doing the film? Sorry, I'm right next to the sheriff's department, so if you can hear the sirens.
No, that's fine. I guess I have a couple answers to that. So on a positive note, I was really educated throughout the whole process of making the film in particular on a lot of the initiatives that I don't think are talked a lot about in our region, in particular some of the collaborations going on between smaller farms and local universities and communities to implement practices to help with some of the non-point source pollution issues that we see in Green Bay and Lake Erie in particular. I went into this project honestly with my knowledge at that point being kind of the stereotype that, ag has not been very good in the water quality realm for a long time. And my eyes were really opened to some of the work that's going on in our region. And it's great work, and it's funded by federal assistance, local assistance. So it's really kind of a multifaceted and collaborative project and effort in the Midwest, in the Great Lakes Basin, to attempt, support doing cover crops or no-till practices, things that are covered in the film. But those were things I wasn't completely aware of. And these demo farms like Brickstead Dairy that we walked by and got to visit, it's awesome to see what they're doing. They implement these practices, and then they bring farmers in from farms all over the region to see some of these demonstration projects. And a lot of those projects are incentivized in some way by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So it's kind of, there's so many essential components to doing good work like that. But I was really impressed to see that, and it really educated me. I would say that's a positive thing. But then some of the really concerning things that I didn't fully understand the extent of, the impacts of mussels, particularly quagga and zebra mussels, obviously, the kind of snowball effect that they've had on so many aspects of not just the Great Lakes ecology, but our fisheries and our local economies, and just the infrastructural impacts that these tiny organisms have had in our region. And as you see in the film, there's one kind of consistent topic that ties into most of these subjects, and it was invasive species in these mussels, even the role that they play in exacerbating these issues with toxic algal blooms. So that was something that was also very educational for me, was sitting down with the folks that are studying that and learning more about that topic.
I agree with you that the zebra mussels were, I know about them. We have them here in the local lakes here in Portage County, but it's almost like an overwhelming impact that I never realized how big it really is to the Great Lakes and the basin and everybody that's involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was eye-opening for sure. It looks like in the chat, Whitney had a question, but Cheryl, you may have gotten to that one with an answer. Yep. So Cheryl, next question is for you. Are we likely to see more combined sewage overflows in the future due to climate change? And what can we do to avoid this?
Yeah, I hope not.
We all do.
But I think it is likely. I think unfortunately we used to have around 50 overflows a year in the Milwaukee area, as locals will know. And we were getting, MMSD had put a lot of work in. There's a lot of litigation and deep tunnel extensions and work that happened. And, those overflows really were dramatically reduced to about 2 to 3 per year. But, I know that MMSD is concerned, and we are as well, and many others, about the impacts of climate change, because, I think as we, develop, there's more and more hard surfaces, more runoff coming in. So you have that element of things, just increasing development of a lot of these, these farm fields that are becoming sold off and developed. And, all of these little inholdings that we have in our Milwaukee Basin in particular, we're getting more and more development. So you have more flow, is coming in and into some of those places, which can cause flooding, in a lot of the more rural areas. And then in the city can add to the sewer capacity issues that we have. But, on the flip side, because of climate change too, we're just seeing more of these heavy, kind of like crazy rain events that we're seeing, more volatile rain events. And so, those I think are those factors, kind of the increasing development and the climate change, I think are going to cause a lot more stress to sewers. We have seen in the last 3 years, unfortunately, kind of an uptick in CSOs in the Milwaukee area. And I think part of that is because of some, 2018 and 2019 both broke rainfall records in Wisconsin. And 2020, was not as bad, but also pretty wet. But, we have been seeing those CSOs ticking up. And so I think, one thing I know MMSD is really working on is dramatically increasing the green infrastructure that we have in the region. They have a goal of trying to capture 740 million gallons of stormwater through, each storm that they could take out of the sewer, essentially, that wouldn't get into the sewer in the first place. And then that could really help, provide the extra capacity we need during those rain events. And so I think what people can do is, really, if people haven't already, and you're in the city of Milwaukee, or if you're in other, I think Superior also has combined sewers, if memory serves. I'm not sure if they still do, but, you can disconnect downspouts, you can do rain gardens, just even planting native plants is so good for the wildlife, for the birds, and for butterflies, insects in general. And also really, those roots do a lot of work as far as sucking water up for us. So, I think just paying more attention to, where you have influence, if you work at a company where you could put a green roof on or something like that, I think all of those measures could really help eliminate CSOs. And we often tell people too, during these really wet rain events, if they can put off, doing laundry, using a lot of water during those periods, that also can be really helpful.
Okay, great suggestions. Julia, what was the biggest issue the Great Lakes are facing today, in your opinion?
Yeah, I feel like this one changes depending on the week I get asked it. But I think that one of the biggest issues that we all can absolutely play a role in, this segues off of what Cheryl was saying, is the issue of non-point source pollution. And in particular, I think we need to make sure that we're doing more on local, statewide, and regional scales to protect a lot of those ephemeral wetlands and streams that are located within the Great Lakes Basin, that essentially act as, the sponges for any of that water that's running off our landscape before it makes its way to the lakes. Those types of wetlands don't and haven't always had the same level of protection that, something like the Great Lakes have, or our major rivers and other water bodies. So I think that that's something that if we don't take that seriously and we don't protect wetlands at that level, we're going to see the effects of those downstream, no pun intended, but they're essential in helping to address issues like non-point source pollution, but they're not always treated with the same level of conservation importance or protection. So I think that that's something that we really need to start taking seriously, especially as we, on local and statewide landscape levels, we continue to become more urban. Development's not stopping. So it's something that we really need to be pushing our local leaders and communities to take seriously.
Okay. Cheryl, what do you think, what more can we do better to conserve wetlands across the state? What can we do to help that?
Yeah, certainly we could. I think it's a hard question. I think we certainly could be strengthening our wetland regulations. We did have, I think, at one point, some of the strongest wetland regulations in the country, but those have been, badly affected in the last few administrations here in Wisconsin. So I think that there's maybe more we could do legally. I know there, folks probably have heard of something called Waters of the U.S., which the Clean Water Rule, but the short version of the story is that as part of the clean, there were a series of different court decisions that kind of threw question on what waters of the United States were covered under the Clean Water Act for protection. And so the Obama administration had put forth some new regulations to clarify things and to make it clearer of what waters were protected and not. And then there a lot of those rules and those Obama era rules got thrown into litigation. And then the Trump administration came in and removed protection from all isolated wetlands, which is, probably roughly 50% of the wetlands in the state. And also they proposed removing protection for all those ephemeral waters that Julia just talked about. So those little tiny, those headwater streams that come in and that are so critical to protecting our drinking water. They basically took away protections for the ephemeral waters. And so that's generally 1 in 3 of our streams, but we know actually in the Milwaukee Basin, it's more like, it's more than that. So, those are very concerning. It's very unclear what the Biden administration is going to do with this morass because there's so many lawsuits and conflicting rules at this point. But I think one little thing that people could do is, and maybe just staying educated on the issues too. But, I think we certainly are going to be pushing the Biden administration to provide clarity to that mess and to essentially reassert protections for those isolated wetlands and for certainly ephemeral waters. It's fundamentally important to protecting clean waters in our state and throughout the country. And I think, getting involved at the local level, I would encourage because, we try to advocate. We have a 900 square mile area watershed that we advocate for. But, and we try to keep on top of development proposals and discharge permits and things like that. But, it's really difficult. And so I think, at the local level, there's a lot that people could do to, I think, try to help protect wetlands and just paying a little bit more attention to development proposals, trying to find solutions to protecting as much wetland as possible, getting involved with local land trusts that are protecting wetlands. I think there's a lot of different things that people could do to hopefully help, to help. But, I think we have tremendous development pressure that's placed on, wetlands that are being filled, for infrastructure projects, for development projects all the time. So I think, we need a lot of people out there just keeping an eye out on wetlands.
I agree. I think we got time for one more question. Julia, we're going to go back to you for a final wrap-up question. What impact do you hope the film has?
This kind of ties in nicely to what Cheryl was just saying. I think at the end of the day, what we really hoped was that this film would just educate people, inform people, open their eyes to topics that maybe they've never thought about before, or they never fully understood as we did or didn't at the start of the project. But I really hope that people, feel empowered with that information to then, incorporate actions that matter into their daily lives, whether that's how they use water. They take that information with them when they go to the polls to vote at any scale. And that we also feel confident as a constituency that's informed about these topics to hold not only ourselves accountable, but our leaders accountable for things that they say they're going to do and issues that they say they're going to address. But I think that's extremely important. And I would hope too that people would feel inspired to hopefully support groups, advocacy groups that are doing a lot of the work out there. Milwaukee Riverkeeper is a great example of this. I know in my daily life, I don't have time to keep tabs on some of the things that Cheryl was talking about that we need to, but these groups are out there that can. So staying up to speed with current events and issues and supporting groups like that are out there advocating for these things every single day is another thing I would hope that people would kind of pull from the film and the project we did and how important that is.
Okay, perfect. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. Cheryl, thank you for all of the work that you do and joining us today. Julia, thank you for all the work that you do and taking us on your journey. It was quite an impressive feat, and we're getting a lot of good feedback too in the chat. So thank you. Up next is the lightning round. So feel free to quick go to the bathroom and then jump back on for the lightning rounds. But thank you for tuning into this session.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Cheryl, so much.